There is a lot of different big new Nintendo Switch 2 news to discuss today, starting with a brand new US sales update for Nintendo Switch 2, as we now have the official numbers for October, both for total hardware, where it's tracking compared to other consoles like the Nintendo Switch and the previous record holder of the fastest seller of all time in terms of console sales, which was the PlayStation 4. Well, we have exact comparisons, and we're going to break that data down, as well as the best performing games right now this month from a sales perspective. We then have an interesting confirmation in terms of how Nintendo is doing some of their free game updates that we've seen them deliver to Nintendo Switch 2 from their Nintendo Switch 1 library. And this report actually has me wondering whether or not we might see Nintendo do more of these free updates over time, because it's not done in-house, and it is, in theory, something that they could accomplish with this said hired team. So I definitely want to break that down. You might want to start looking for some storage solutions for your Switch 2 if you intend to buy Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate, because we have the official file size update, and it's quite a bit bigger than we previously thought. And finally, I want to close this out with a couple games that stood out to me at the Xbox partner preview that we had go live yesterday, because we actually did see some Nintendo Switch 2 content at that event, and there's a couple standout notable ones that I want to highlight with you all. So we'll get on the same page with all of this info. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick this off right over at My Nintendo News, where you can see the following article, which outlines US Nintendo Switch 2 sold 328,000 units in October and is 3% ahead of PS4 sales pace. The latest video game software and hardware charts have come through for the United States for the month of October. The Nintendo Switch 2 was the best-selling console, shifting an additional 328,000 units. Circana, which tracks the sales data across the USA, says the Nintendo Switch 2 is 68% ahead of the sales pace set by the original Nintendo Switch and 3% ahead of the PlayStation 4 sales pace, which was the previous record holder. And while 3% sounds like that gap is closing very rapidly and quickly, Nintendo won't be the biggest and fastest selling console with the Switch 2, the one thing you have to keep in mind is that we are still leading into the holiday season, its first holiday season on store shelves for the Switch 2, whereas the PS4 launched on November 15th, 2013, so they kicked it off in the holiday sales period. So I actually think it makes the Nintendo number just a little bit more impressive. And listen, if you look at it compared to the original Switch, which also launched off holiday season like they did March, 68% of the pace set by the Switch, which was a huge console that launched with Breath of the Wild. Of course, this time we saw Mario Kart World and followed up with Donkey Kong Bonanza and all of that, but you get the idea. These are some unprecedented numbers for the Switch 2's pace, considering that it hasn't seen its first sales cycle on holiday store shelves, and that's what we are approaching now. Now, don't look for discounts on the Switch 2 this holiday season, but nonetheless, people are going to be in store picking up new items for all their family and loved ones, and I do think that we're going to see a big uptick and surge in the Switch 2 sales performance during that time, and it's already the fastest selling console in history, and I think that that goes even further up as we approach November and December, the biggest shopping months in retail period. And we've already seen Nintendo doing things like committing to upping their original 15 million forecast to 19 million for this fiscal year. So things are looking good in terms of console sales for the Switch 2. You might not care about sales data all that much, but in all reality, when a console lifecycle performs well and it kicks off to a good pace, that is a huge indicator to third parties considering bringing their content to that platform, that it's alive and vibrant and a platform they want to be a part of. So it ultimately means more games for you and I at the end of the day, and it also potentially means a longer, more fruitful generation, even from Nintendo developed titles at the end of the day. So this is good stuff to see. Then to talk about the best-selling games, while we were talking about the Circana sales data, you have best-selling games of October 2025 in the US on Nintendo platforms. This comes to us from Nintendo Everything, and no surprise, Pokemon Legends ZA launched in October towards the, well, I guess the 16th, I believe, was the date it came out, but middle part of the month, walked away with the top spot, as you would expect. Super Mario Galaxy and Galaxy 2 right behind that, which I think also kind of makes sense. It was the big October 2nd release to kick off the month on October 2nd. And, you know, obviously people were ready to play Galaxy 2. Many people who picked up The 3D Mario All-Stars collection, still were missing that, like myself. And there's a lot of people that are just going to hop into both of them for the first time because, you know, people are growing up, moving on, and you might have not even been buying games whenever the 3D All-Stars collection came out, or you got into the Switch ecosystem after that one was discontinued. So no surprise that that's number 2. Donkey Kong Bonanza number 3, which is actually nice to see because I want to get some more love and sales numbers for DK. I do think that this game is performing well in terms of total sales standards, but if it's a juggernaut, at the end of the day, we will see Nintendo greenlight another 3D adventure for Donkey Kong, and that's definitely what I want to see because I thoroughly enjoyed my time with Bonanza. One of my games of the year of 2025, not my actual game of the year though, just because the insane level of quality from a couple other titles from this year, which is insane for me to say as a lifelong DK fan, but still super loved my time with Donkey Kong Bonanza, every single minute of it. Little Nightmares 3 and Final Fantasy Tactics coming in next, and then you have Dragon Quest 1 and 2 HD 2D remakes, Sonic Racing Cross Worlds at number 7, Super Mario Party Jamboree at number 8, EA Sports FC 26 at number 9, and Minecraft on number 10 to round it out for the top 10 best-selling Nintendo titles in the month of October. Okay, I want to move on from there and talk about who's been developing the upgrade editions of free upgrade packs for Nintendo Switch games that got a Switch 2 enhancement, not the Switch 2 edition, but just the free upgrade. Well, you have the exact answer here in terms of who is responsible for that over at VGC, and you have honored to be selected Texas-based developer hired by Nintendo for Switch 2 game updates. Panic Button has worked on dozens of ports in the last 15 years, and you have here at the launch of the Nintendo Switch 2, several Nintendo Switch titles were given updates to improve performance on the new console, which weren't as extensive as the Nintendo Switch 2 edition upgrades or the likes of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Now, speaking on social media, US developer Panic Button has claimed responsibility for the 4 games. Panic Button was honored to be selected by Nintendo to help update marquee games from the Nintendo Switch library. A post reads accompanied by an image of Super Mario U Deluxe, Super Mario Odyssey, Super Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and ARMS. Nintendo asked us to help demonstrate the new capabilities of the Nintendo Switch 2 system while remaining faithful to the original games. And so what I find really interesting about this is the fact that Nintendo did not do any of these enhancements in-house and rather went to a port studio, which is not owned by them, and they're definitely known for porting a number of different games. But what has me hopeful about this is the fact that we could actually see Nintendo focus all their development efforts on all of what's coming next for the Switch 2 and still comfortably look at other Switch 1 titles that may be sold enough that warrant some kind of free content update or free performance update rather. Like, I would love to see that for something like Metroid Dread that we are just sorely missing. I mean, having that game play at something like 4K 60 when docked and maybe even a 1080p 120 hertz mode would be an excellent addition. We got the update for Link's Awakening already and Echoes of Wisdom, but I would love to see Skyward Sword updated as well to take advantage of 4K resolution when I'm ready to replay that the next time around. I mean, there's a ton of different quality Nintendo Switch 1 games that exist from a first-party Nintendo published perspective that could be in line for this kind of upgrade treatment, and the fact that Nintendo will hire a company like Panic Button to focus their efforts on it, I think is actually a good indicator that we could see them slowly release new updates over time, as we did also get the confirmation like recently that Splatoon 3 got that better resolution and better enhanced graphics and everything like the other games did. But it came later. It wasn't there at the initial launch of the announced games. So there is already a precedent that this could happen, and that is exciting to see that Nintendo could, in theory, just continue to have them work on other ones as they were done with the initial first batch. But we'll have to wait and see where, if anywhere, it goes from here. But I definitely hope we see more free performance patches for previously released Switch 1 marquee games. So let's hope we see that. Moving on from there, get ready to buy some additional storage for your Switch 2 if possible this holiday season, especially if you are planning on buying Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade. You have this write-up from VGC. Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is the biggest Switch 2 game so far at almost 40% of the console's base storage. Final Fantasy VII Remake comes to Switch and Xbox in January. And you have here in a post on X, the Final Fantasy VII account wrote, correction to Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade storage requirements on Nintendo Switch 2. The standard edition, 90 gigabytes to 95 gigabytes. Limited early purchase edition and limited early purchase digital deluxe editions will range between 93.8 gigabytes to 99 gigabytes. The Nintendo Switch 2 ships with 249 gigabytes of available storage. Based on Square Enix's statements regarding the size of the upcoming RPG, this would mean that installing the game would consume almost 40% of Nintendo's Switch 2's base storage, which is absolutely an insane number. And this is kind of funny to see these kind of numbers talked about in relation to the size of the game, when we've seen the Final Fantasy VII series director kind of go on record multiple times talking about the key cards are the future, the key cards really should be adopted by consumers and stuff like that, because they're probably not trying to, and it's not even possible right now because Nintendo doesn't manufacture it, but they're probably not even willing to pay what a 128 gigabyte cartridge size would cost. So even if you could get around the load speed things, like they're kind of blaming the key card thing on, like, you have to install it straight to storage, and that's the only way we can get our bigger open world games to run effectively. There's some truth to that, I believe, because we've seen the Star Wars Outlaws devs mention the same thing, and Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate team mention the same thing. So there's probably some reality to that. We even saw slower boot up times for games like Mario Kart World off of the cartridge than the internal storage, but it's not drastic. And you do have games like Cyberpunk 2077 that do run and load just fine in big open environments without being read off of the system's internal storage. But regardless, 90 to 95 gigabytes, like, yeah, that's probably why they're thinking, okay, for the vision of Final Fantasy games, we don't even want to think about trying to put this on a traditional cartridge, rather game key card being the solution for them. Because if you went up to something like 128 gigabyte cartridge size that Nintendo manufactured, and we're already talking about the cost of the 64 gigabyte cartridge size being a big deterrent for third parties to put their games directly on the regular cartridge, well, you see where that could kind of lead. Just get ready. I would definitely start looking at some Black Friday sales and pricing on microSD Express cards. Get yourself at least an extra 256, but really I think the sweet spot for most people is going to be 512. And I myself finally secured one of the Lexar 1 terabyte microSD Express cards, which should hopefully, in theory, carry me through this entire generation. But to close this out, I just want to highlight a couple different games that we did actually see showcased at yesterday's Xbox partner preview, and one of them being Artemis, that was announced for Nintendo Switch 2 officially. So to read through the full details of the description of this game, Artemis is a third-person roguelike shooter set in the demon-infested ruins of Paris. As the last supernatural warrior of an ancient order armed with powerful firearms and incredible celestial powers, scour the city in search of a lost gateway to heaven, the Sunless Gate. The world has ended, demons overrun once busy streets as reality unravels, collapse is inevitable. Sequestered behind holy wards, the last survivors believe themselves to be the only humans left alive. Their hope is for you to carve a path through the chaos and find their salvation, but the broken pieces of Paris give way to increasingly demonic hellscapes inhabited by ever stronger and more grotesque monsters. So a third-person action-adventure shooter roguelike. It looks good enough. It is one of those games that visually, I will say, will be nice to see run on the Nintendo Switch 2. And while we know the game launches in 2026, we do not at this point in time know an exact launch date yet, but a cool one that was there at the event. And then the other one, Crowsworn, is actually a Hollow Knight inspired game headed to Nintendo Switch. I'm sure it's playable on Switch 2 via backwards compatibility, as really all games are, but I don't know if there's any kind of Switch 2 edition or upgraded visuals or resolution plan so far. But Hollow Knight inspired, after I wrapped up Silksong, this game looks really fun to me. I do admittedly want to take a break from games like that, just because literally, like, Silksong almost broke me at nearly 70 hours to get through all of this stuff of Act 3, and still didn't even 100% it, 89%, which is fine with me. I super enjoyed every minute with that game. But this has some pretty cool parts. Like, at one point in the trailer, you actually see a minecart section straight out of like DKC, but he's shooting a gun at the same time. Almost Bloodborne-esque for the vibes as well whenever it comes to the visuals. Really cool. You know, if you like 2D Metroidvania style games and you like more of these indie level projects that end up sometimes being really big hidden gems, like, I do think that this has the potential to be that. So I will keep my eye on this one. And this is a game that unfortunately we also do not have the release date of, but we know it will be coming at some point in the future. So a couple things I wanted to highlight from that. And we did get a quick shout out and look at the upcoming James Bond First Light that will be headed to Nintendo Switch 2 day and date, with kind of the car, that the Aston Martin, of course, that James Bond will be driving, and some of the features around it. It was a really quick trailer, not like a ton to highlight and overview with that. there will be some pre-order bonuses and stuff where you can play the game 24 hours early if you do indeed pre-order it, and some outfits and different bonus sets, and some crazy looking collector's editions that you can look into as well. But let me know in the comments down below what you make of all the different stories we talked about today. What do you think of the Nintendo Switch 2 sales momentum in the US so far, and worldwide for that matter? What do you think about Panic Button being the studio developing the Switch 2 updates for these Switch 1 games we've seen so far? And do you think we'll see more of those in the Switch 2 life cycle? What do you think about Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade being 90 to 95 gigabytes just for the standard edition? Artemis, Crowsworn, or 007 First Light, are you excited for any of those games and planning on picking them up when they come out? And finally, let me know what you're currently enjoying on your Switch 1 or Switch 2. So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.